Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we have Jeff Hance, Scott Kendall online, Casey Leahy, Katie Murphy, Lois Perla, Lisa Sanders, Jerry Usi, and Donovan Nichols. Rick will not be joining us today. We just let me know if he shows up. All right, looking for an approval of the agenda or additions and deletions.
I move that the board vote to include an executive session in tonight's meeting to address personnel matters. The executive session would take place after the future meetings and agenda item section.
There's a second, let's see. All in favor of adding an executive session?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's do that moved in. Are there any other additions or deletions?
People want an update on the teacher negotiations.
Like an update?
Yeah.
Does that need to be an executive
Yes.
session?
Yes.
Okay, so. Motion out
Can you
of
put the video on, please?
I move to add an executive session to discuss negotiation with teachers. Wherever Adrian would like to place it.
Why don't we just do it right after the other executive session? Does that work? Let's go back to back.
Second.
Right, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, all right, any other further additions or deletions?
No idea.
Motion to approve the agenda with the changes? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Itinerary set. All right,
Check just to make sure that people can see it. I'm not sure why the video's not working.
And Scott, can you see or not at this point?
Can't see nothing, just says GMSU library.
Pointing at the ceiling.
Mhm.
Was pointing at the ceiling. That's
We can hear you, just can't see you.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I'm not sure what the issue is. Participants. Let me try one more time.
It's supposed to be going to home. It's just slow.
At this point, again, with the kids.
right. We're trying to install them.
So my assumption is you're not seeing anything yet.
Till Thanksgiving, like.
Nope.
All right, I'll try one more. So one more trick up my sleeve here.
Anybody else have any of those?
Excited about it. It might be on that panel right there.
Usually it's three.
Days.
I don't know how to use those things.
This one's odd because it's not touchscreen.
Is it, you sure it's not on your computer, on your desktop?
I can check. My desktop's working fine.
Sharing it, I'm just thinking.
Actually, David, can you see anything you want?
No, all I have is this weird, like, full screen.
It's Craig's fault.
I'm picking up.
Video on it.
Yeah, usually it's not
So, okay, so that's just, that'll show my picture on here, but Scott, can you see anything besides me?
Can't even see you.
Three dots.
It just says GMU.
Now we can't hear you.
Yeah, it's weird that
It says video is off, which is interesting on this.
yeah, we can try restarting. the
But I'm
meeting.
gonna leave.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave this, have this leave.
Can't hear nothing now.
Wonder if there's an actual problem with the unit up there.
It just says the video is off. For some reason.
Or Amazon is messing with us again.
Yeah, it could be. I see a loose cord hanging there off on your right.
Yep, I see it.
So two.
I apologize. We may have to do without video. I wonder if we could still present though.
You can present. It's just this board, I think it's. They can't see you guys. It's like a. Thing.
Yeah, my guess is the camera's not functional.
What's that white cord at the bottom?
There's two of them there. They don't appear to be video cords. They appear to be signal cords. They're like phone lines.
But these are not lines.
So we're gonna proceed without video.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay. But it might speed.
All right, okay, so now we are at approval of minutes. So looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the September 18th meeting.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed? So approved. Brings us to our first public comment. Comment that'll bring us to our monitoring organization reports. And so we're just gonna do this a little bit out of order. We're gonna move facilities to the top.
Okay, before we get to, Craig from Turner is here to talk about, the ECA and the PCBs. I got a couple of things that I feel you guys need to know. Our FEMA project at Chester Andover is moving forward somewhat. We've been, had those, FEMA and Visbit been in contact, so it's moving in a decent direction, better than what Cheryl and I thought it was the last time. The door project here, we got a full approval from the fire marshal, and the wood doors are actually in-house. At our supplier, so they'll be putting those in November, and that project will be done. Completely done by the end of November. So the wood doors will be here, so that project will be all done, and we found out in the past couple weeks that the fire alarm system works extremely well. It even picks up vape because it'll set the fire alarm off and we evacuate the building because of the new algorithm that's on there, and they can't change it, which is fine. So we've got some kids that we've got their attention now that the fire alarm will go off. The last thing I have is when I asked for some money from capital improvement. So this was brought about a year ago. When there was no facility supervisor at Cavendish Elementary School. We've had some door problems there, the exterior doors. I worked on them myself. The panic bars on a couple of them don't work properly. They're just wore out, they're old. One of the back doors I had to push on it myself real hard to get it to open, and just the door closers and the thresholds are just salt is, they're at their end of useful life. So we did it right. We got some pricing to fix them. It was a ridiculous amount of money. It was over $10,000 to fix old doors. We got 3 estimates. They were above the, 2 of them were above the $40,000 threshold. One of them was just below. So from a reputable company. So I'm gonna ask that you allow us to use $39,980 for 4 sets of double doors for the exterior doors at Cavendish Elementary School, which will include the hardware, installation, and the front door, not the one where the swipe card is, or the electronic entrance, but the other side, if you're familiar with Cavendish, the whole glass part, that's gonna include that as well. And the other 2 were considerably more money, and I don't wanna say who they are right now. Out of respect that if you decide no, and we wanna send this out to bid, which I think this would probably not be a good idea. But if we do, I wanna make sure that I don't say who the company is that had that price, out of respect to them.
Is there any difference in the product for the higher and lower bids?
No, they were close, but not close enough to say, I think we should go out to bid. I mean, and it's close, it's only $20 under the 40,000 to go out to bid, but if we go out to bid, we're gonna get these 3 companies to bid on this, and the prices are gonna be the same. So, I think that this is something we need to do. The doors, a couple of the doors don't close unless you stand behind them and close it. They're just old, and it's
You said the crash bars aren't working properly.
correct.
Which
Yeah, the
means you
panic
can't
bars.
open them.
One of them opens extremely hard, and they've tried, they've tried everything. Tony has tried
Second
everything.
grader may not.
Correct. That's correct. Yep. Yep. And there's there's nothing anybody did wrong. It's just they're old. They're wore out.
So are those doors like those double doors?
They're both sizes. Yeah. Except they're exterior doors. They're gonna look just like the ones that you walked in, whichever doors you walked in to the school. They're gonna look just like those. Yep. Storefront doors.
Can I have that number again? 39.
39,980.
I move 39,990 out of the capital improvement fund to the facilities.
Out of capital.
Our capital improvement. What did I say? I don't know.
Second for the doors at CTES.
All right, is there further discussion on the motion? All right, so all in favor of moving 39,980 out of capital improvement to purchase 4 sets of double doors for CTES?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's Granite State class, so very reputable. And the other 2 companies were reputable companies too, wasn't it? Fly by night, I felt we did this right and got it to where we need it to be. So thank you. At this time, I think everybody's ready. I'm gonna bring up Craig. Craig has been our environmentalist. He's talked to you guys before, and he's gonna talk to you in detail about our ECA.
Should you email it over? Actually, this is good. This is. What else? They'll show up on the screen.
We'll try shit.
You do understand.
Like it.
Yes. One for you. One for you.
The sugar content of the candy. It's just taste it. Explicitly candy, 100% sugar.
It's work. I don't know if they can see it at home. Can you guys see that at home? Scott?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, great. Or you can take the chances.
If you don't mind, I might. That's fine.
Okay.
Like what?
They just recognize they're gonna be.
Yep.
But
They're not up there.
and right and left arrows.
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name's Craig Starrett. I'm with John Turner Consulting. I'm your environmental consultant for the PCB situation here at the school. Thanks for having me back. The last time I was here, we brought you up to speed on the sort of investigation phase that we completed on where things were going to. And the next phase was the completion of an evaluation of remedial actions that would be appropriate to address the PCBs in building materials at Green Mountain Union High School. So I'm here now to present basically our findings of that evaluation. And this is an evaluation that's required by, we have Patricia Capolino and Sandra Blanco here from the Department of Environmental Conservation. They're here just to listen and to get the community input, but this is an opportunity for us to get from you. I'm going to present what we did, what we looked at, where we arrived in our analysis, and then what do you guys think? So, this is just a recap. We first identified PCBs in indoor air during the initial screening effort in April of 2023. Didn't automatically do that. Does anybody know how to stop it from doing that? Auto advancing. I thought, I set it up to not auto advance. Does anybody, is this still big enough for people to see?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Then let me just go back up. So, so then we had some clues from that indoor air data that window caulks were probably a suspect material. We confirmed that in July of 2023. We subsequently identified the exterior window caulks as well as being very high concentration PCB materials. And then in a subsequent investigation that we completed in February of this year, we also identified PCBs at much lower levels, but present in flooring mastics and wall paint throughout the school and in expansion joint caulks, which are only present in the gym and cafeteria on the inside of the building, but there are about 16 of them on the exterior of the building in the brick veneer facade. And those are mostly in areas where there are no windows, large areas of uninterrupted wall. So the objective of the evaluation of corrective action alternatives is to identify appropriate remedial strategies to address PCB containing and PCB contaminated materials to eliminate or reduce exposure of building occupants to these chemicals. And we broke this down into 5 main scope items because it was a good way to look at things. And those scope items were the window caulks. And when I say window caulks, I'm referring to window, exterior door, and louver caulks. So these are sort of omnipresent anywhere there's an exterior opening in the building. The second scope item were the expansion joint caulks that I mentioned. The third scope item was the PCB containing flooring mastics and what we call the substrates, which is just the material that PCB containing material is adhered to. It's usually, in this case, it's always here, it's poured concrete floor under the floor tiles. For the caulk, it's the brick that you see over here, and sometimes CMU, concrete masonry unit blocks. The fourth scope item, was how to manage. We did identify concentrations of PCBs in wall paint, in door frame, the metal door frame paint, and in some of the stairwells, the paint on the floor. Again, these were relatively I mean, significantly lower levels than in caulk, but they are there. And because of the just the amount of surface area, these are, considered, an important potential source of airborne PCBs. And last but not least, we looked at the soils around the building perimeter in areas where the exterior window caulks and the expansion joint caulks had deteriorated over time, dropped into soil, and we measured those concentrations and did find but lower than we were expecting, but we did find concentrations of PCBs in soils that will have to ultimately be managed as part of a comprehensive corrective action strategy. So each of these scope items was evaluated according to 11 evaluation criteria that are listed in the Vermont Investigation and Remediation of Contaminated Properties Rule. So these are the principal regulations from the Department of Environmental Conservation. This is the section that, these are the evaluation criteria that we looked at for each of those scope items. For each of the remedial options that we evaluated for each of those scope items. So the first scope item, as I mentioned, these are the caulks. So these are present all around here. This is a close-up of the caulk for a sill plate, but this caulk seam goes all the way up here. Inside, I mean, they're right here in this room. They're present from here down to here, and here down to here, and these are big, thick caulk seams. So there's just plenty of this material. And because of the placement of the unit ventilators, the fresh air intakes are pulling in, especially during hot weather, are pulling in PCBs that are being emitted from the exterior materials. So these are the alternatives that we evaluated. The first the approach is basically scraping out as much of the caulk on the inside and the outside of the windows as we can access, leaving everything in place. And the second would involve removal of the windows in order to access, and the unit ventilators and the cabinetry in all the rooms to access 100% of the PCB containing caulks, remove those, and then also access the substrate. Most of it is brick, sometimes it's CMU, to do some grinding or scarification, some sort of ablation there that would reduce residual PCB levels in those substrate materials prior to encapsulating those substrates, which would still be expected to have low, but still above the cleanup level values of PCBs with an epoxy encapsulant. The third alternative that we evaluated was removing all the PCBs and all of the substrates that the PCB caulks were connected to. So just going back to these drawings, that would be basically on the building exterior, it would be cutting out brick all the way around here. On the interior, it'd be cutting out brick all the way here, brick all the way here. In some of the school areas, there's the interior substrates are concrete blocks, so we'd have to cut that out. And anyway, so that was what we evaluated. And if we could do that, we determined that it wasn't going to be practicable. And that would have been the best option. We've gotten rid of everything. So I'll show you. This is what we did. We looked, these are those 11 evaluation criteria. We ended up giving a numerical rank to each of the alternatives vis-a-vis the individual criteria. And then we arrived at, this is sort of a summary. And is that clear? Yeah, it's not that clear. I wish it was bigger. Sorry about that. So we looked at the three. We ultimately, our preferred approach, what we recommended, and this is, all up for discussion, was the second alternative. The first alternative we determined was inferior due to the fact that it would leave approximately 25% of the interior caulk in place in just about all of the classrooms. And we have no way of knowing for certain that reducing the contaminant volume by 75% would achieve corresponding reductions in indoor air levels. We just don't know that. There's no literature to say that's what happens. So it would leave a significant amount of our target material in place. That's the main reason that we felt that this was not going to be, even though it's technically feasible, it was the easiest to implement. We felt it would have long-term, it was poor when it came to long-term effectiveness and permanence. We also felt that you might not get EPA approval for that approach due to the fact that we would be leaving a significant amount of materials in place. For the alternative 1B, this is the one where the windows come out. We're able to remove all the caulk. We're able to treat the substrate, encapsulate the substrate, and then put in new windows. That would allow us to get 100% of the interior and exterior caulks, reduce the residual PCB concentrations in the substrates, encapsulate, which may not even be necessary if we get those levels low enough in substrate through grinding, but we wouldn't know that until we started doing it. In terms of efficacy, we just realized, I mean, when you look at the cost difference, it's substantial. This is for the entire school, by the way. And these are estimates that are based on numbers that we've received from the school's preferred general contractor and from several environmental abatement contractors that we solicited quotes from. So this is a much more expensive option, but it is also a much more effective option. The third option, this is the one where we remove the brick and the concrete block surrounding the windows in addition to the windows, build all that back, put in new windows. We determined that just wasn't going to be practical. The feasibility of doing that was just too fraught. The brick facade and the building exterior is in, so-so shape. There are cracks. The amount of money it would cost just to, because of the amount of caulk on the exterior windows, it would be, I think, very costly to attempt it. And none of the masons that we discussed this with thought that they could even really do it without risking significant damage to the building facade. So that's why we landed on alternative 1B as the best approach. We think it will remove almost all of the primary target material. It will reduce residual substrate levels. And then there's this level of, then there's this encapsulation that would prevent any remaining residual PCBs in substrate from emitting into indoor air. We think that's our best chance of success later.
No, way back when we had talked about the encapsulation, about sealing the stuff in place. Does that put us in a position to test into perpetuity? If the materials are still here, or is there a way that, if we get like 4 or 5 clean tests in a row that
So, yeah, so if we were to get, there would have to be a monitoring component because, so anything that involves encapsulation or what's just referred to as on-site disposal of material, either a primary material or remediation waste, there would have to be long-term monitoring. So the frequency of monitoring would be dictated by what we're seeing in results. It would be more frequent up front, and then hopefully we'd see, low levels over several sampling periods, and then reduce to, an annual, biannual, triannual. But because breakthrough can happen, the epoxy encapsulant is not a permanent solution. I mean, 10 years is a number that's generally thrown around for, how long that can be expected to last. So if we ever, we would just want to keep an eye on things. And if we ever saw levels creeping back up again, then we would say, maybe it's time to re-encapsulate those substrates.
Thank you very much.
Is this the time to jump in with questions?
I'll take questions anytime
Yeah.
because there are 5 scope items and I'll try to get through the rest of them more quickly. But yeah, go ahead.
So this comparison and selection is made based on cost and air levels. Do we know the relationship between level in the air and actual health effects in terms of either PCBs in the blood or PCBs in the fat, and what those health outcomes are? So if we're trying to solve this in terms of money and air levels, but we would need to know what the effect of that is on kids and staff to know what's okay.
Okay. So the state's school action levels are based on these, were determined by the Department of Health, and they are based on health outcomes associated with exposure to PCBs. And in this case, the principal exposure route is inhalation. So that's why that's how the cells were created. So I'm not a health person. I'm a remediation and investigation person. So I can't really speak to that, but there is a body of data that supports the action levels that the state of Vermont adopted. Yes.
Back to the encapsulation of the epoxy, you kind of touched on some of this. About my questions about the efficacy of the epoxy and the encapsulation. You said about 10 years is the expected life of that encapsulation. So theoretically, 10 years down the road, if we do this, we may be revisiting the same work scope to remove it, scrape it, re-epoxy it.
So no, the costs, these long-term costs, whether it's for this option or this option, these numbers include the cost for re-encapsulation at 10 years. So it's not redoing the whole scope of work. It's just re-encapsulate, putting two new coats of two-part epoxy coating on top of the existing ones and doing it like that. Yeah. And again, that would be, when to do that would be dictated by the monitoring. And if we get those levels low enough in substrate, there might not ever be any breakthrough or need to re-encapsulate. You have a question?
So I have two questions. So plan B, window comes out, but that window can't be cleaned and put back in. You have to have a new one.
Our window experts, everyone that's looked at them is convinced that these windows just won't survive that they're just too old.
And then plan A, you said there's no other school has scraped the epoxy off and then retested months later or years later.
You mean the caulk?
The what?
You mean the caulk?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that has been attempted at other schools, including I've worked on one project, and there have been larger such projects that have been done where accessible caulks have been abated and then encapsulated and then recaulked. And in my own personal experience, we did not see great results with that because we were leaving both, some target material in place in areas that we couldn't access because of built-in univentilators and built-in cabinetry, and because of just relatively high residual levels in substrate that were sort of higher than the threshold that we like to see. There's research that's been done that shows that if you can get PCB levels below a certain number, I think it's about 480 parts per million, but then it's probably going to be fine to encapsulate without rapid breakthrough. But that higher concentrations will encapsulation is less successful if there are higher concentrations remaining in substrate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are these fixed costs or could it possibly go up? Because I'm just looking at like the 1B.
Yep.
At 7.8 plus another almost $1 million over the next 10 years. And then and then 1C, which is the, kind of the best one is only 1.8 million difference. But is there a possibility of, the cost in 1B going up over the years?
So I've taken that into account into that 10 years. So I have, the numbers that I've put in, which are estimated numbers based on quotes that I, have, to do the work now. And they are, basically, I've just adjusted them using 3% annual inflation, including the cost. And they include the cost of re-encapsulation at 10 years at, 3%, I'm sorry, 2.5% annual inflation.
Last question, at least for me. So we remove the caulk. There's been contact absorption into the substrate, into the bricks that are beside it. Has any work ever been done on actually heating those bricks to try to get them to degas quickly or to use the heat to destroy the PCBs that are there?
Not that I'm aware of, certainly not in the context of of the Vermont schools. I know that thermal processes have been used in soil where there have been large PCB oil spills and things like that. And it is, I think it's still, a main tool in the toolbox for that, but God,
No, good.
yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Craig, can you speak to any other schools in the state that have done any of those remediation or window replacement or removal, North Country or whatever, the success or failures they've had in doing this?
So I'm not a consultant for those schools. I've read the reports. So at the largest school where it's been attempted, I mean, I would just describe the results as mixed. And I haven't seen the levels below, the levels that we'd like to see yet. But they do seem to be trending downward. So again, I don't know. In my personal experience, we didn't have great success with that approach. And I'm just finding out, we've done our first project where we did caulk abatement in the context of capital improvements that were taking place at another school where they were removing the entire, windows, and we were able to get to that substrate and grind it down and encapsulate and do that. And so far, our initial results are promising.
So where we did copper removal at North Country, we encapsulated everything and we did wipe samples afterwards and it was all non-detect.
Yeah.
So it was done successfully there. There were still some sources left in place which are causing some problems. But the actual removal of the caulk and leaving the windows in place was successful.
Okay. All right. So, and then that is why we looked at these other materials is, and that's absolutely correct. We have every place we've done encapsulation. I mean, it is effective. We do not see any PCBs when we take a wipe on the surface. So there's nothing coming through there. So yeah, thanks, Patricia.
Can you just speak to like what was left in place that's causing problems and what those problems are?
The largest issue is their univent system and some PCBs that are in between the walls that they couldn't get to.
Okay.
But they did a majority of removal. They encapsulated all the walls, but there's still some high concentrations in the univents themselves. And since North Country was in the middle of trying to evaluate keeping their school or rebuilding their school or what kind of transition they wanted to be in with their school, the univents weren't looked at and they were a larger source than I think most people expected them to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Regarding the 10-year estimate on potential breakdown of the epoxy and encapsulation, is that data from similar climate like we have in Vermont where we have these extreme colds? I guess what I'm trying to ask, is it based on similar climate changes? Because we have these extreme swings of
Yeah.
super hot to cold and
Yeah.
the stress on material. It's 10 years, is a significant sample size for data, right?
It is. I can't say that I've looked at our specific climate conditions, but I mean, breakdown is more highly associated with weather conditions, exposure conditions, things like that, than the actual, PCB concentrations. They play a role, but it's just like any material that can become weathered, yeah. So, but again, I don't know the answer for our specific region and weather conditions.
Well, I got one last question, Craig, and I mean, Craig and I talk about this weekly, seems like, but I don't know if we've ever talked about this. If this went through and we did window, whatever we do with the windows, but the caulk removal inside and out, pull the univents out, remove all the caulking. Are we fairly confident that the other sources that we found in the paint and the plastics aren't gonna cause us enough problems where we're still at levels where we wouldn't be able to move fifth and sixth graders to this building if that was the case?
That is an unknown, and
It is a fit.
what we know is that the concentrations of PCBs in the window caulks, and I'm convinced these are the dominant source of PCBs in the school, and that most, if not all, of the other materials, with the exclusion of other caulks, expansion joint caulk, and there's some stair trim caulk in one of the stairwells here, but that everything else, the PCBs derive from absorption of airborne PCBs emitted from those caulks. So these are, I mean, one of the samples we took was 50% PCB. It was 460,000 parts per million. I have actually, I mean, there. So these are the concentrations that we've seen up to an interior window caulk, 460,000 parts per million, exterior up to 190 parts per million. When we look at other materials, we're looking at low thousands or even hundreds. Yeah. However, there's a lot of paint in here, and any of these sources that have absorbed PCBs can re-emit them. So then that's why this is a scope item here, even though the highest concentration we saw in wall paint was only 99 parts per million. Surface area plays a big role in this, so we don't know. What I would advocate for, what I think best approach to these 5 work scope items is to begin with, I mean, 99% of the actual, contaminant mass is in these window caulks. Start there, evaluate, see if you need to do something else. See if you need to go to the next thing. Yes.
Does all of the abatement need to happen without students or staff in the building? And are there workers to get that done on the kind of time scale that means, not while school is in session?
So this work for this scope item is best accomplished with an empty building. The work is going to be accomplished from the building exterior using lifts. There will be critical barriers inside. If we had to, we could, seal off areas and do things like that and do this work while students are here. But we're envisioning more like for the window caulks, 3 summer mobilizations.
Not to interrupt, but we talked to a contractor, Craig had sent one over, and we had this exact conversation. What happens if it can't be finished? And they were fairly confident that they could isolate some rooms if we had rooms to put kids and keep it safe and do 1 or 2 rooms at a time if we had space, which we do here, to move a classroom for a period of time and do what they need to do.
So, I mean, that can definitely be done if the school can accommodate it, and we can, devise a schedule, a rolling work schedule where work can be done in one area, completed, cleared, and then move on to the next.
It may be completely naive, but is the actual equipment and people available to do it in like a 3-month summer timeframe, or
these businesses.
Maybe not.
Yeah, no, they are, so the abatement companies, I mean, that's what they do in the summer. They work on schools. And, so, yes, I mean, the challenge here is, the scope item 1B, which involves replacement of the windows, that's a big part of it. That's a whole build back process. So that's,
Dependent on availability of windows.
yes. Yep. If we were to proceed with that route, we would have to, and we want to begin initial mobilization, where, just this is all preliminary, but discussing beginning on the third floor where, we want to get younger kids in. We could, put together a work scope where the abatement part happens quickly in the beginning of the summer, as soon as school's over, and then build back, happens. And the contractors are confident that they could do this. There would be a little bit of spillover on the build back side, but because this would be past the remediation stage, there wouldn't be hazardous conditions. It would just be construction conditions from the building exterior. We could, if there was going to be spillover into the school year, we would make arrangements so that it didn't interfere, too much. It would be finish work, things like that.
So it's noise and vibration, or it's after class?
No, I just, in the interest of time, we're pushing almost 35 minutes.
Sorry.
I think there's more to go, and then there's additional stuff. So
Yep.
Can I just suggest to take notes of questions we want to ask, and maybe it can be emailed to Lane and sent to you.
That would be great. And Todd and Lane both have my contact information. If you want to reach out directly with questions, feel free.
I think one suggestion, so something that we were talking about on the way down. Fully recognize it's a lot of information for everybody to kind of digest in one go. So we were thinking maybe Craig will do his presentation today. And of course, we can take more questions, but it makes sense for us to come back again and have maybe a more in-depth discussion, go through more questions. If that'll be helpful, we can definitely do
I
that.
think that would be quicker and will allow people to think through things.
Yeah, and I know that we've been talking about the sixth graders coming and some more school specific stuff. So I think if we can kind of amalgamate all that together, we'll come back and go through it all.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, and I will move things along. So the next scope item was the expansion joint caulks. This is pretty straightforward. These are exterior seams. You can't really see them in this picture, but they're interior seams in the gym and the cafeteria. And we evaluated two alternatives. The first is scraping out the caulk, encapsulating substrate, and then recaulking with obviously non-PCB materials. The second alternative we evaluated was doing the same thing, scraping out the caulk, cutting out the substrate. So basically, a channel on either side of the seam here, but the same sort of issues, the structural issues. It would be more expensive and just less technically feasible, just given the age of the brick facade. So for that one, I can just skip all this stuff. We arrived at alternative 2A as the preferred alternative, which is, it's cheaper, it's faster, and it doesn't, and because we're going to have long-term monitoring in place because of the other materials that are here in the school, it just doesn't really make a big difference in terms of, you can see that the actual cost of doing it is less. And when you see these O&M numbers like long-term monitoring and stuff, there's going to be a school-wide plan for that. So this is, per scope item, but when it all gets blended together, the costs are going to, they're going to come down. So that is for those caulks. And just again, the PCB concentrations in those materials were 39,000 indoors, 57,000. Those are the highs on the outside. And we don't think that those outside caulks are causing too much of a problem indoors because they're not near windows or fresh air intakes. The third scope item is flooring mastics. So we looked at, you still got, some asbestos containing 9x9 tiles in the school. So we looked at those mastics. We looked at representative mastics for 12x12 linoleum tiles that are in place. We looked at for a carpet mastic. This is the mastic for 9x9 tiles. This is a picture of some carpet mastic. We found levels up to 2,200 parts per million. That's for all the different types of flooring mastics. And again, so these are in select areas. Very surprisingly, we found that the largest area where the 9x9 tiles are still in place, which is the cafeteria. I'm sorry, is it the cafeteria? Yeah, the cafeteria. Did not contain PCBs above there's the 50 parts per million threshold of that mandates removal, which leads us to believe that PCBs were probably mixed with the mastics when those tiles were being applied, and they were used in some areas, but not in that area. And then, but overall, like the median concentrations in these materials were quite low. So for the linoleum tile mastics, and again, I think most of the PCBs in that material have just been sorbed from the air, possibly from PCB containing mastics that were there previously, and there's residual content there. But for most of the school, which has 9x9 tiles, I'm sorry, 12x12 linoleum tiles, the median concentration was only 29 parts per million. And it's not like wall paint. There's, you see how it's troweled on like that. The carpet mastic is a very thin application. Anyway, it's still there. It's still significant. The two alternatives we evaluated were removing obviously whatever flooring is above it has to come out. Then we remove the mastic, and then we encapsulate the substrate because the mastic PCB concentrations are relatively low. We think that would be effective, the substrate, removal and then encapsulation. However, the other option that we evaluated was removal of the flooring mastics, and then using a type of ablation. We've used a hydroblasting technique at another school with very similar PCB concentrations in flooring mastics. And we got, when we did the post-abatement sampling, everything was less than 1, which is the target that we're going for. So we think that that's something that's achievable, and it doesn't cost more. It actually costs less than the encapsulation one. And it's permanent, and this part could conceive, because if you can get to the value of less than 1 part per million when you're doing your post-abatement verification, then EPA approval isn't even required. Our entire work plan is going to require EPA approval because it's going to have parts in it that require on-site disposal, encapsulation, etc. But anyway, this was sort of a no-brainer, in my opinion, because the cost was lower and we're going to get good results. And if we, I have every reason to expect. So we did 4 rooms at this school and did, a zillion samples after, and they were all minuscule, non-detect or well below 1 part per million. So that's why we're recommending that alternative. That's what I just said. So this is wall, door frame, and floor paint. This is just from our sampling. So wall paint is everywhere, obviously. The metal door frame paint, and then the 2 of the stairwells in this part of the building. We identified PCBs in paint. Interestingly, when we looked at the layers and were able to do it, we thought maybe we find old PCB, because PCBs were added to paint back in the day. And we thought some of the lower levels might have PCBs in it. Turned out that the upper levels had higher concentrations of PCBs in it. Again, just indicating that these are sorbed from air. And they're the same, or the same kind of, fingerprint, the same type. Regardless, the EPA considers PCB contaminated wall paint and or just walls, period, a remediation waste, and prefers to have it all addressed. And therefore, we had evaluated the option of just identifying rooms where one or more sample came back above the 50 parts per million threshold that would mandate removal or mitigation, or the option of encapsulating paint in any area where a sample greater than one was measured. And that we did a lot of things. That would basically be every painted surface in the school. So that said, when we did our analysis, and I have tweaked these numbers based on our conversation, we're neck and neck there, but this might be a disqualifier because EPA may simply say that's not an option. But what they may also say is, you don't have to do this all at once. Just do this, instead of, augmented painting, routine painting, when it can be done, gradually, place by place, maybe, strategically, starting with the rooms that have higher concentrations in them. But as long as there's a plan in place to address the materials, then EPA is likely to, approve that. So, and it's expensive because the product itself is expensive, and then you need, painters that are experienced with it to apply it. And these would both, of course, go along with long-term monitoring plans. In fact, the omnipresence of PCBs in paint basically means we would have to, come up with a long-term monitoring plan that monitors representative spaces, maybe on a rotating basis to, capture indoor air levels across the entire school building. So last scope item, and this one's just easy. So this is just the PCBs that have fallen off the deteriorated window caulks and outdoor expansion joint caulks and gotten into soil. And there are two values at play here. There's the 1% cleanup, the 1 part per million cleanup value that is promulgated by the TSCA regulations, those are the federal regulations, and then Vermont also regulates PCBs in soil at an even lower level. So what we looked at was alternative A, was just excavating all the soils, and we've done most of the delineation already, so we know sort of relative volumes of soil. They don't, they're not yards out from the school. In one case, maybe a yard, but most of them, they come down, they sort of accumulate in shallow soils pretty close to the building. So the alternatives were excavating all the soils until we get below the Vermont soil standard. The second option was to excavate soils down to the 1 part per million TSCA standard, and then just adding new soil. If we put in, even if there are still levels above 0.11, the state standard, if those are covered by a compressed, it's a sort of an engineered soil cap, then that will, the state would approve that because there will be no direct contact with those residual PCBs. The third was to just cap everything with 18 inches of soils that would satisfy federal and state requirements. But this was sort of just disqualified because, actually, it's better just to show you in the picture, because the space between the window, that's about 11 inches there. So we couldn't get 18 inches of soil on top of the existing soils. So we can't really do that. Plus, capping soils above 1 part per million, there are just more onerous long-term monitoring requirements and engineering plans, erosion control methods, things like that, that the federal regulations require. So we arrived at alternative 5B as being the best one, dig out everything above the 1 part per million federal cleanup value, and then cap whatever's left in place with a design that is satisfactory to the state regulators. And that's it.
So, yeah, everybody, I mean, is there any possibility of getting the slides?
I'd be happy to send them.
That would be great.
You've already emailed them to me. You're okay with me sharing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also the final, I have comments back from DEC on the ECA draft that you received and Todd received. And I'll make the requested changes. I don't think there'll be another round of revisions, but we'll get the final report out to anyone that wants it. Thanks for the use of that, Wayne.
We also have isotope. I see one there.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that, thank you all. So that brings us to superintendent's reports.
I was gonna do a presentation. Budget constraints. Probably what I'll do is I'll move through it very quickly. It is actually attached to the agenda that you have there. And a lot of it is really about an examination of what the financial landscape is looking like, both within the state and across the country, with the idea that what's happening out there, especially this year, is going to have a dramatic impact on what we need to do in terms of our budget time. A couple of parts and pieces here that I think are kind of important to give a broader picture. Remembering that in the state of Vermont, we all pay for everybody else. So what is happening at that giant collective level in terms of the education fund is important, because we all pay a share of that. So $2.7 billion is used in the state of Vermont to fund education. 1.1 billion of that is for staff salaries. Staff salaries mostly due to inflation and people needing extra to make sure that they still have the same buying power over time due to inflation are predicted to rise by 15% over the next 3 years. So you're looking at a $165 million increase to the state education fund. In terms of the second biggest driver for the education fund, that's the health benefits. 5 years ago, to provide the health benefits that districts do to their employees, the cost was about $17,000 for a family plan. 5 years later, it is now $40,000. Based on that, the cost of those benefits has been increasing by about 13% per year. We did get preliminary notice from the state about 2 or 3 days ago that the insurance group is going to be asking for a 7.3% increase this year. A lot of that is due to some of the work of the state group that negotiates with the union, trying to find some ways to cut costs. And one of the things that they are doing is eliminating the ability to use insurance to cover the Ozempics and things like that. Because the biggest piece of the biggest driver for the increase in the healthcare costs is prescription drugs. Inflation is a main driver as well. Historically, it was always 1.6% cost of living increase from year to year in New England. And that went back probably about 15 years. That all changed about the time of COVID. It's down from what it was a few years ago, but it is ticking back up. It's currently about 3% rising at this point in time. And so that means like when we go into negotiations with support staff, which this board is going to do in a little while, you know, they are going to be expecting more because they don't have the same buying power. That's to be expected. The other things, and I think these are probably the two biggest ones that we want to touch on. And you'll see us trying to address this in November when we come in kind of with preliminary budgets, is the impact of federal legislation and state legislation. Right now, it looks like Title II is gone. Title II funding, we usually get about $300,000-400,000 a year. That provides us with the ability to do professional development with our staff. A lot of the curriculum work that happens across the district to try to improve best practice within the district has or will be eliminated. And so this board did a good thing last year. You know, we anticipated that there might be cuts due to the changes. You've kind of already built that into the budget if we just leave it alone. So for us, it's not necessarily an increase, but it means trying to keep what was in there. The bigger concern, I think, at this point in time is individuals with Disabilities and Education Act grant funds that supports special education services. While they have not eliminated the funds themselves, which is what they have done, is they have cut all the staff that administer those funds so that they cannot go out. And so now the question is that going to impact us this year, or is all that money already in the state coffers to be, you know, doled out to the schools as it should? So it's unclear if there's an impact this year, but there most certainly will be an impact next year that we'll need to address. One of the big things, at least at the federal level, is there's a giant push with the bill that was passed a few months back, kind of expanding the voucher system. Vouchers are where families actually receive an allotment from the government to be able to use to pay tuition for their children to go to whatever school of choice they would like. They're also been talking a lot about education savings plans. Really, the only difference between an ESA and a voucher is that you can do more with the money under an ESA. You can use it for tuition, you can use it for therapy, above and beyond just straight tuition schools. Why this is important is because there is a collective lump sum of money that public schools operate off of. And when you open up the voucher system, it's like they're tapping into that aquifer, they're sucking money off that's no longer available for the public schools to operate. Typically what happens is the vouchers will benefit wealthier families because the amount that the government's going to give is not going to cover the full tuition to private education. The wealthier families can make up the difference, and then the poorer families will, you know, attend public school, but now a reduced public school because the funding is not there to run them properly. So as a part of the shift, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but there's other pieces that would need to be built in to balance things out, which are not currently in the process.
Do you know what vouchers or ESAs can be used for homeschooling?
ESAs can. Vouchers, I'm not sure. I believe they can because homeschooling, especially if you're paying for a program for homeschooling, is a form of tuition.
Right.
Yeah. The state legislative actions that are costing a considerable amount of money, and a lot of these are unfunded mandates. Is, you know, one of them we're talking about is the PCBs. It's pretty clear that while, you know, we're happy that they're helping out, it's not solving the problem. There's also the lead testing and the refurbishments that have to happen across the state because of that. Even though it may not be impacting us directly, if the school down the road has to replace 500 faucets and all their plumbing, that affects us because we all pay for each other. There's the radon testing the state requires. In addition, there was the Universal Free Meals Act that was put into place. One of the things that was snuck in about 3 years ago was a child care payroll tax, which I don't know if it was a surprise here. Cheryl's around somewhere. It was a surprise to us when we got the first bill because it wasn't talked about widely. But basically to fund, their ideas around expanding childcare in the state. They charge every district 44 cents per $100 of pay that we pay, to put into a fund to help support, childcare. And I'm not clear on where the money is going. The money is being collected, but there's been no change in childcare that I'm aware of that the money is being used.
The subsidies have increased.
Ah, that's very good point. And not only increase, but increase significantly. Yeah, so that's a good point. Teacher retirement benefits, again, there's been kind of an expanded effort. They're using more of the education fund for teacher retirement benefits, which means there's less money available to us to do our work. There's the unaddressed mental health issues. We have very talented staff within the schools that work with some very challenging students, and who can keep them on track, but do not have the skill set to actually fix the problems. That requires specialized care that simply does not exist. And until it does, until those things are taken care of, it's going to be an increased expense to manage those children as best we can. There's also the academic mandates that we've had, like the standards-based report cards and personalized pathways, which have taken an enormous amount of staff time and funding across the districts to get into place, to little or no positive effect across the state. The last piece I think that's on everybody's mind is, Act 73, the redistricting effort. Act 73 in its essence is basically a bigger version of Act 46, right? When they were consolidating districts, this was just a bigger consolidation. The state was required to actually do some pretty significant support analysis of what the impact was educationally and financially on the state. It never did. There was a researcher from Yale who took a look at it because that information was never produced by the state, which was required, and found out that the Act 46 consolidations actually cost the state an additional $1,300, almost $1,400 per student. In terms of staffing, transportation, and supplies to support the new structures that we'll put into place. And we're about to embark on a system that's pretty much the same thing, 10 times bigger. There's also the potential impact of waiting for special education. The big tax increase that people experienced 2 years ago was due to the waiting study and the fact that the state recognized it was more expensive to educate some kids equally, depending upon their circumstances, than others. And so they provided additional money to do that. That was the reason for the big increase in taxes. That is about to happen again because they have opted to go from a block grant method of paying for special education that they just shifted to going to a weighted method. So expect another big tax increase coming. And again, the reason that I bring it up is because there's a huge potential impact to taxpayers out there, but there's also confusion that it's because of what the schools are doing that is causing these increases, and that is not the case. It's legislative action. Biggest things that you're going to see that we're going to plan for as we go into this budget season is making sure that we've got some funding to support the elimination of the Title II funds, to make sure that we've got our professional development best practices happening in the school, to make sure that we have the funding available in case we see a reduction in special education funding. And one of the things that we should be doing, and I think that the district started last year, was building up some contingency reserves because of the uncertainty. And I think that's going to be important. Things that might be a net benefit that we might talk about is bringing on a grant writer. If we can bring in a grant writer who's bringing in 5 or 10 times their salary, that's a good thing to do. We are in a position that next year we are supposed to be starting the attrition of staff under the new law. We've got 3 years to get it done, but it is supposed to start next year.
I smell something burning here.
Probably my brain after one. Okay.
You see how it smells?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there have to be grant funders for there to be.
and that's that's the analysis that we gotta do.
No, it's
Well, the other thing I think that you brought up You talked a little bit about the research funds drying up. A
Yeah.
good chunk of that IDEA money was for research that they
Yeah.
are eliminating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gone.
So basically, my recommendation for in general, and you'll see that in our first presentation, is a level service budget, right? We don't want to cut anything that we don't need to cut because we kind of got what we need to get where we want to go right now. Depending upon what's going to change that we can't anticipate at this point in time. There is a need to take a look at the non-bargaining staff salaries because they are way out of line in terms of the comparables across our region. They're way low. So, there's going to be some recommended adjustments to those. We already talked about building the reserve and making sure that we're covering that Title II loss. So that's what you're going to see from us, in November with that first kind of round draft of the budget discuss. Sorry for the rush on that.
Appreciated. We'll have the negotiation of the Word curriculum report.
So Luisa's reports, it is in the folder. The one thing that I will add to it is a part of Act 73 was this idea of standardization, right? Standardization of curriculum. The state kind of for the first time that I have seen is developing a standardized curriculum K-12 across all the core content areas. So Louisa is gearing up. She's got a team together, and all of us are heading to the first state training webinar conference on that on November 4th to get that going. And so there'll be a lot of information that comes back from that. But that's actually kind of a good thing. The district here has some curriculum documents in place, some that are half formed and some that are missing. This is going to save us a lot of work. The trick is that if the state is developing it, is making sure that the staff has the time to actually go through it and reflect on it and understand what it really means in terms of how to implement it in the classroom. So,
I'm not gonna see another podium, I'll just sit. So it's nice to see everybody. It's been a while. And there was some conversation at the last board meeting that I thought I'd come and address, but before I get to that, the financial is in the folder. And I've done a year-to-date, from a previous year-to-date, comparison. And I don't know if that's something that everybody likes. It doesn't make a difference. If you have any thoughts on it? I would just continue to do it.
that was a look on Mount Hollywood.
It was a Love on the Holly request, but we just did it
That's
for
good
everybody.
request.
It's easier for me to, same thing for everybody than try to remember who wants what. So I've also added below that, I've added, things that are over budget, under budget, or things, information such as this time, for Chester Andover, they are now in a flood zone, floodplain, and we have an additional like $8,000 insurance bill that we have to pay for them because of that status. Separate from on and above our regular insurance. So questions about the financials? I do invite, I know Jerry, you and I have not met yet, but anyone that wants to get a deeper dive down, Ben came in and spoke with me, understand that financial a little bit, understand the process of budgeting, how to read those codes, reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody. So we did the heating oil bid. There was 3 bids. Irving came in at $254, HP Energy $288, Bart Energy at $285. Obviously went with Irving at the $254, and I budgeted $3, so I'll have a nice little save. So the 2025 24-25 audit, the work has been completed. I received one of those today, so I'm assuming the rest of them will be coming right down the pike on that one. They're due to me by the 15th. And so I anticipate I'll have them all in. Then once they're complete, this goes back to part of the reason I came, Claremont. When I asked you, would you like the auditor to come? I hopefully have a different answer this year. We say, yes, we'd like to do the auditor. Part of what's happening in Claremont is that they don't have the regulation for mandatory auditing. In Vermont, for a school district, we have to do it every year. For the federal audit, you actually, the auditor said you only have to do that every 3 years, but in Vermont, it's required to do annually if you have more than, well, this year, $1 million worth of federal funds that you get. So my understanding of Claremont is that they read a financial wrong and gave a deficit as a surplus and give back to the taxpayers, which doubled it. And then there were some other issues, but they hadn't been audited in about 10 years. This is still what I've heard. So because we get in audited annually, those reports are available. Someone else is looking at our work. My report card, it's my, you know, how are things going in the district? So it's sometimes, much I want to gripe about the audit, it's a good thing that we have, because it checks our controls. For that. So, like Lane said, next month we'll have the draft budget. I think it's gonna be a tough budget year. A lot of unknowns and a lot of maybe, but what if, things that are happening, so we'll do the best we can and get through it together.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, Cheryl. So. Nothing else, Lane, we're gonna move into old business. So it looks like
These are
it's just pretty much updates.
Yeah, so these were just kind of follow-ups and some questions that came up when we were talking about the two protocols at the last meeting. One of the questions had to do about the communication from the board, like if there's a board complaint. Was, you know, what's the role of the chair? In going through, you know, looking at your current policies as well as policy governance policies that you have. And as well as the state requirements, it's the role of the chair is whatever the board decides it is. So it's as simple as that. So I think the question that come up is should it be the board chair that is the complaints officer, or could it be someone else? And so again, that's left up to the purview board. The protocol for board vacancies, this was the question that came up, we talked about a little bit, but yeah, it's us that pay for it. In Vermont, the school districts are a separate entity from the town, financially and everything else. And so since it's our work, it's our bill. But that's not true in every state. A lot of states, the school district is a part of it.
So that seems like we would not want it to be a default to go to election every time if the board could otherwise be happy with an appointment.
Financial incentive to do it ourselves.
Yes. So are we reviewing those policies again tonight, or?
I was answering the questions. The answers to them might change what the board would like in those protocols. So, you know, if you have accepted the protocol for the communications from the board, the next step would logically be to choose a complaint officer. So who's the person who on the fly has the authority if a complaint comes in to acknowledge to the person that, hey, yeah, no, we've heard you, the board is aware, and you know, we're taking the next step to, you know, make sure we're doing what we need to with the law.
But we would also need another read of each of those protocols, right?
The protocols, not policies.
So I think we need to bring them back to update these two. Because I don't think we actually made a final decision for vacancies.
No.
Because we wanted that information. And then I think I don't have them right in front of me. I think the discussion about the communication for the board was the two separate entities, like was the communication person going to be different from the chair. So I don't think we actually made a final decision on that. So we don't have them in front of us. Do we want to put them on next month's agenda just to finalize those two protocols?
I'm good with that.
The two that are in the folder, they have all the most recent changes that people asked for. But if people, you know, want to take a peek between now and if there's more changes when we come in, you know, next time, or if there's stuff ahead of time, just let me know.
let Lane know, don't send it out as an email to us. So directly to Lane or bring it to the meeting. Is there any discussion on those?
It makes sense to me. My only thoughts on the complaint officer is who's willing and attentive enough to respond in a timely manner. There's timelines attached to it.
I mean, to be honest, based on my experience thus far, and I'm not saying it because I want it, because I'm not sure I want to be chair anymore. I think it should be the chair, because I mean, that's the person that gets the most direct communication. It's the person talking about the agendas. It's the person that has kind of that. It's that mentality, like you're just all over, you're just thinking about that sort of thing all the time. So I think separating it to two people would be kind of a disaster. So I think if it's, well, wait a minute, let me back up. Did we designate it to Lane and then the chair would be back up? Is that what we did?
So-
I can't
Lane
remember.
would be the to this person.
Lane would be the.
So there's
backup.
the contingency that, like, if it's the day it's due and something hasn't gone out right, then I'll do the basic.
That was my other thought of, if there's someone who won't pay attention at all, then Lane goes home.
Or they have something happen in their life and,
Yeah.
yeah, be back.
I actually disagree. I think that having somebody else do it would be better. Only because it is the chair who has run that meeting in the first place, so having someone bring a complaint about that to someone else might be smoother or easier to do, just in terms of having a second person be the check or the. Like,
But the complaint officer isn't going to be doing anything in regards to like the meat and potatoes of the complaint. It's just going to be getting going.
It's just answering in a timely manner and keeping it. And
Right.
They're not on my screen at all.
Sorry about it, I just let them in.
Oh, okay.
right, I'm just suggesting that the complaints themselves might be about something the chair has done. And so, at least in terms of balance and appearance wise, having someone else be the first response to that might be better.
What do you mean first? Like,
Like, if I have a complaint about something that has happened in the meeting, having the chair respond to me to say, nope, that really wasn't a problem. Or, yes, we recognize that and we're gonna do this next. Seems less effective than having a second party do that same thing. If the complaint is about how the meeting was conducted.
I absolutely see what you're saying. I just like, what if the complaint's about the person that's, complaint officer? So I think we're it's gonna be kind of, I think just having that like straight line is. But we can talk about that at the next meeting. So you guys want to think on that a little? Okay. All right, and then in regards to, you'll just bring back the board vacancies protocol.
Just so I'm clear, so on the communications from the board, do we want to just leave it in its current format and figure it out next time? Or am I hearing that we want to make the complaint officer the de facto chair? Or is that what the board is still trying to decide?
It sounds to me like we can just stop this.
Okay.
Else? Decisions for everybody? Okay. All right, then we'll bring the protocol for the board vacancies back just to. Sure that's tight and that we're done. Did everybody read all of the ELs that were sent out? Okay, so. We're gonna,
Is this ELs or the mandated policy?
no, we're just going into it just so we don't stop. So we're gonna do the second read for the A1, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B7, B8. Then we're gonna go into ELs. And that'll be EL21 and EL22. And then the new ones will be in the new business. So for second reads, were there any for the VSBA policies, was there any concerns, changes? What anyone wants to bring up?
Most of them were mandated, therefore I don't see how much we really had the ability to change.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if we go to our legal counsel says VSBA uses the right that. Maybe the policies, right?
I mean, I read them all,
Read, understood.
No changes requested. Is there a motion? Would you like to do this? Do you want to make a motion to accept them in block or do you want to do them separately?
I think, I would move to accept them block.
Okay, so make that motion.
Sure. I move to accept the annual policies, block.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So. A1, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B7, B8. Accepted. Okay, that moves us into the executive limitations. The second read of 2.1, treatment of students and parents and guardians. EL 2.2, treatment of staff. Buddy?
So I know this is kind of under the next topic of policy governance review of what has been accepted. But my understanding is that we never had a second reading and vote on policy governance. At least I couldn't find it in the minutes anywhere. And so I'm confused about what we should do with the interpretations of executive limits if we haven't voted on policy governance.
I thought we never had a second vote on adopting policy governance.
Yeah, so I thought that we must have as well. But in our last meeting, I had this confusion about whether we were gonna be reviewing all of the policies or only the executive limitations. So we talked about, should I go back and review the minutes to figure that out? And when I did go back, what I found was, was that on June 19th, we had our first read of policy governance, and there was a discussion of, are we going to review, do we want to approve interpretations? Is it pending review of interpretations of the policy?
June 19th.
That was June 19th.
Amber, are you able to pull those up?
Yeah, I have the June 19th.
Great.
Um,
Able to,
do you want me to read that?
please.
Board governance, first read policy governance. The board reviewed the policy for the first read. The policy will be brought back to the next meeting for the second read and possible approval. If approved, the administration team will develop interpretations of the policy and present that to the board. The board will then continue to review the interpretations throughout the year based on the reports from the superintendent. There was discussion about approving the policies pending the approval of the interpretations. There was also discussion about the annual calendar and when the various policies would be.
And we're gonna piece them up, do a couple at a time.
So is the question that you're posing is if we've actually formally adopted policy governance as our way forward?
Yes.
Okay.
Make a motion to do that now.
So in moving to do so now, I think that's fine. To me, there's still an open question about whether we are approving policy governance pending in approval of interpretation of each policy, or is that only executive limitation? So that was the thing that I was asking about last time. And so I don't know whether that's something to discuss or.
Did you want to, you guys had an exchange, is there any help?
Yeah, I'm I recollect pretty much what, this conversation, what I remember was that, that really stood out to me was, the ELs were going to be accepted as they were approved. at that point in time, but one of the things that we had kind of went back and forth a little bit about this idea was that it's clear there's confusion about, where things stand in terms of policy governance. I'm often confused when I come in because sometimes I'm operating under policy governance and I do things and people get upset about it, or, I put back on the board and then people get upset about it. And so I think the best way to move forward is for the board maybe to have a discussion, decide where you're at and what we're doing so that we're all in agreement, here and now in terms of what's happening going forward. Because there is confusion. I'm as myself as well. As far as it relates to me, I can work under policy governance. It's a good system. I can work under the normal governance system as well. It doesn't matter to me, but what does matter to me is it's got to be clear, because we're going to end up stepping on toes and having conflict and everything else if our concerns are interesting.
Agreed.
So,
I mean, I thought I had not gone back and read through the minutes and missed that I was I guess, operating under the understanding that we'd already adopted it, have been working through these executive limitations and policies to really just fulfill that in its entirety. So,
That was my
that's my
That was
my opinion, is we keep moving forward, so if we need another motion or more discussion,
I kind of think that's where we're at is, do we just agree to move forward with policy governance as a vote and then continue on the pathway of ELs? Or do we?
it doesn't make sense to me to work our way through all the ELs and policies if we're not going to adopt it as governance, because that's just a lot of wasted energy. The beauty of the policy governance system, as I understand it, read it as if Lane gives us an interpretation we don't agree with. That's where we have our pushback and say,
change of policy.
we disagree, we're going to tweak this. We own the framework, Lane interprets that framework, and that makes sense to me.
So for me, the distinction that sent me looking back to the minutes in the first place was about whether these interpretations were only on the executive limits, or were on all policies.
I mean, I think, because when we went through all of the education, we went through what the policies were as a group and in the classes. So I think.
But we did
At
that
least-
for executive limitations too.
As well, yeah. So, I mean, I think. I don't think that it is going to be in our best interest, time, energy, investment to continue to parse out. We all read them. We all know what they are. I think that we can, at least I'll speak for myself. I'm comfortable with what was put in front of us. I was under the impression we voted for it. And now we're just tweaking the interpretations as we go through. I don't think we have enough time to go through every single policy and then do the executive limitations. Is that what you're trying to go for here?
That we are, I thought we were voting on moving forward with policy governance, but that each policy, not only the executive limitations, but as outlined here, the ends, the board management and governance process. All right, here are the 4 types. The global ends, the executive limitations, the board management delegation, and the governance process, we would not be accepting until we voted for the interpretation. That was just my understanding of that original discussion.
So there might be, one of the reasons for this is I thought it might help. There are the 4 different policies. The 2 of them that are related to me are your ends and your executive limitations. So, the appropriate process is, you have provided a policy, a current one, My job is to do an interpretation of it. Your job is to say, is that reasonable? If it's reasonable, then you can't hold me accountable, but what you can do if it's not quite what you wanted it to mean is you tweak your policy and then I have to go back and reinterpret it. The other two are the big question right here and now. Those relate to the board and roles. So board management delegation is, what authority has been given to the superintendent. In other words, what stuff am I running autonomously and what stuff am I bringing back and saying, board, make a decision?
Yeah.
And then there's governance process, which is how the board acts among itself, how it does its thing. And so what I might recommend is saying, okay, so which one of these are in effect right now? And which ones are not? Which ones are piecemeal? How, because right now I don't know, is this in effect, how you guys are acting with each other and what my role is. And so that's.
Like to bring it to our attention if we're outside of the.
Yeah, and for you to bring it to my attention to say you're acting, so, because right now it's kind of mushy.
Yeah.
And so I think we're stepping on toes and I don't want to do that. I don't know if I made any sense or not.
Well, I think my understanding is we agreed to accept these policies and then tweak them as we went throughout the year. That was my understanding. It sounds like your understanding is we're not doing that. So I guess the question is, what does the board want to do? Because, we need to be on the same page, be definitive and move forward one way or the other. We either did or we didn't. We are going this way or we're not. I just, we'll spend way too many board meetings in the weeds unless we are on the same page and make a decision. So
And
what is the board's
those
role?
last two don't get tweaked because of anything I do, because there's no, that's by the board for. So those won't come up unless you actively decide.
I think to me, it makes sense to adopt these and keep moving forward.
Same.
Does it make sense to keep pressing forward, and putting a lot of time and energy into something that we're maybe ultimately not going to use or adopt? But I thought we'd already done that, quite frankly.
Same.
I did too.
Then let's make it official.
But 619 was the first read and I read all the minutes past 619 and we never went back
So you
to.
just want a second read that we've adopted, is what you're asking?
Well, with a clarification of, in that first read, we had discussion of is it pending approval of each policy or not? And that was a discussion because it was a first reading. We didn't have it. We didn't have it as part of a motion either way, as far as I can tell.
And for clarity, I would ask that, if that decision-making process is separate for each category. Let executive limitations, are the current skeleton in place now or as they're being developed? Ends is that's kind of our complete purview as it is, because we got to wrap up the interpretations on them eventually. Here, I've actually asked the folks to suspend them until this was clear, to continue to work on them. And then, your board governance and your board delegation, are those in effect now or are they still a work in progress?
I was under the impression that these were in effect now, and then we were going through and looking at the executive limitations and tweaking with your interpretation. Kind of, when we went through these in the class and I hope individually, we were in agreement. That's where I thought we were.
That's what I thought. I thought we worked on the policies in the workshops. If you will, and then we were going through.
Yeah, that was my impression.
So I would, make your motions in terms of what you want to do so that, as we walk out of here tonight, I think for all of us.
Can you help me with I guess I need to know specifically the wording that would be needed both for clarity for everybody.
So
I think that's where I'm struggling is
Yeah, so if we look at executive limitations, is the motion that the framework that you currently have, is it in effect right now in totality? Or do the executive limitation policies go into effect after the two reads of my interpretations?
And do other policies go?
Yeah, and I would do the same process for each of those categories. Make a motion on each of the categories.
Reed just did something.
Yeah, something weird's happening.
He turned his camera on. With the little star on.
Yeah, there's quite a few, which is good.
So if we didn't have a second read, which doesn't sound like. I think that we have to schedule that out for meeting, right? I believe I read something in statute that would tell us that we have to warn about a second reading before adopting policy, right? So if we don't do that, I think we would be violating the law.
My understanding is second reads are best practice. So yes, you should, but you don't have to.
It would be good to
After-
actually
yeah.
read it as a second.
Again, this is,
Or whatever the board like.
yeah, this is what,
I'm running the meeting, not up to me.
yeah.
So what is the board's vote? I would you like, Lisa?
Well, a second
Is this on me?
Cause I feel like there's the confusion about the second read is in regards to whether we're adopting policy governance was brought up by you. So policy, I just make it personal. So policy governance, we are looking for a second read at the next meeting. Is
Yes.
that everyone's at? Okay, so second. And then,
And in part of consideration of that, I would like for, as each of the 4 type A policies, for us to, as part of the motion, are we accepting them as is and subsequently reviewing them? Or are they accepted pending review of interpretation?
I would think accept it as is and.
That's a discussion for
That's a board decision.
the next meeting. Warning, no?
Yes. Amber, do you have all the wording for that?
This, what Lisa just said?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So. I don't know where that leaves us now for EL 2.1 and 2.2. I think we have to put that off to the next meeting as well.
So this is, since I'm unclear of
Yeah, I am.
what I'm supposed to be doing and what my role is, I need clarity.
But it sounds like until we approve it on a second read, we are not a policy governance. Right, realistically.
That I don't know.
But that would factually, that's, if we didn't adopt it, we're not.
I've been held accountable to both policy governance and in my time here and to the old way of doing things. And so I'm making a very clear statement that I need to know very clearly from the board what is governance policy. So that I know what I'm doing. It is unfair to put me in a position where I can be held accountable for things that the board has not been explicit about.
Well, I guess based on what I just heard. We are not under policy governance.
Okay.
Clear for everybody?
Based on the minutes and the discussion we just had, that sounds like where it stays until we have a second reading, make an actual decision.
Just so I'm clear. I thank you.
All right. So that will put a pause on EL 2.1 and 2.2. And there's no point in reading 2.4 and 2.5 in the next round here. So what I would like to propose is when we take care of this at the next meeting, we take care of 2.1 and 2.2 should policy governance pass. And then everyone is prepared for the first read for 2.4 and 2.5. And then ideally to keep us on track, have you done any work on interpretation for the next round for the budgetary stuff?
I can, but I just recognize it's a lot more, because those are lots of provisions.
Yeah.
It's like superintendent succession is the easiest one provision.
So, I feel it's safe to say that we are the majority of the board is looking to move forward. So unless there's somebody else that doesn't feel that we need to, I would ask you to be, to put out the next two so that we stay on track. And I would ask the board to do their due diligence and have the board about this meeting.
I'll try to have by Wednesday. That way, hopefully there's plenty of time.
So again, to be clear, we're gonna have the second read of policy governance. So also pre-read in the June 19 meeting minutes. We'll have the second read then. There's going to be the question about whether we are accepting it as is, like all the work that we did in all of those meetings. Or if we're gonna be doing each one individually pending interpretation. And then should that go forward, we will be doing the second read of 2.1, 2.2, first read of 2.4, 2.5, and then the next ELs, I believe that are going to be around budgetaries, right?
Yeah, I can look at that.
Yeah. Okay, all right, are we clear? Okay. All right, moving on. Let's see, sixth grade discussion, is there an update on that, or is there?
That was more, and we can shift it now, the policy piece is clear. What is the board's desire? There's been a discussion on and off about, it's taking obviously some time to try to fix the crowding problem over at Chester Andover. There is a plan in place. It's becoming complicated at this point in time. Because I don't know if Todd, I think Todd brought up Bisbit and the FEMA group are kind of fighting it out over who owes what to the district. And so there is a potential need to try to resolve this issue. And the easiest way, if the PCBs were here, at least that from the outset was this idea of let's bring them over here. We've got a middle school model. Research on middle school models is middling, with the exception of groups that have a strong fidelity, especially to the social and emotional development of the kids during those years. There's a very positive impact. People that have a middle school model but don't really have fidelity to it, obviously. But what's the board's decision on this? Do you want this to be pursued? Drop it? Is there another avenue that folks would like us to pursue in terms of trying to manage at least improving academic achievement through a middle school model, and we're trying to resolve the population issue?
So I have three major problems with this potential move of sixth grade to Green Mountain. Should I share them all at once or one at a time, or this isn't the time? What's the?
Sure.
Okay. The first is that moving sixth graders to Green Mountain is a disaster for Cavendish families. To get a sixth grader to Cavendish Town Elementary School, you can leave your house somewhere between 7:40 and 7:45. To get a sixth grader to Green Mountain, you can either put them on the bus at 6:30, which means that 11-year-old is spending over an hour on a bus, much of which includes time with much older students, which we know is really problematic.
Happens in a lot of districts.
Yes,
Let's just let Lisa finish.
but it is a much bigger problem for Cavendish families right now, where that time on the bus is over an hour. And with much older children, where we know we have major behavioral problems, including language and bullying and drug use and other issues. I looked it up, the last date when the sun rises before 6:30 is September 25th. And then again in April 2nd. So we're putting these sixth graders on the bus in the dark between September 25th and April 2nd. Except for maybe like a few days because of the time change. As this board has noticed, there are major challenges for Cavendish students integrating into the much larger Chester, Andover, Baltimore population. And that job of trying to move from your much more familiar neighborhood school to a much larger, much less familiar, much older school is that much harder for younger children. This is still in the Cavendish piece, but right now, CTES is a much higher performing school than Green Mountain. And it's hard to see that sending children to a lower performing school a year earlier is good for them. We hear over and over again that absences are a real problem, that the success of children is dependent on the time they spend with their children. But there is also evidence that children who are more distant from the school they're going to are more likely to be absent. And so if you're sending children to a school that's farther away, they're going to miss more school days and they're going to do less well. We also hear about the importance of parent involvement in learning in the school, but parent involvement is much harder when that school is farther away. It's harder to get the kids to after school activities, and it's harder for the parents to actually be involved in that activity. There are currently 9 children in the CTS 5th grade. But as you said, Adrian, it's probably likely that this would only affect 5 to 6 children because every parent who can will find some other place to send their 6th grader than Green Mountain. And it will only be the parents who have no other choice to send them here.
Okay.
Yes. Green Mountain has already maxed out the number of children who are requesting to go somewhere else, and in fact, paid tuition for children to go somewhere else because it's not a good environment. And so, yes, I think of those 9 children, it is probably only 5 or 6 that would end up at Green Mountain, and that's because families who could do something else would do something else. And it's really hard for me personally to forget the outrage when it was suggested that a few Andover families might attend Cavendish Elementary School. And it wasn't even those families who were expressing outrage. The fact that that came up as a possibility without getting community input was treated as an impossibility and something we would never do to people in this community. But now this idea that we could send Cavendish children on the bus for an hour, get them up an hour earlier to a school that is performing less well, and in a place where honestly they are often not quite welcome, is being treated like something we don't even need to get input from the board or from families about. That was point number 1. Sorry. The bigger issue for me is, even if we put this in the context of the larger district, which we have all been asked to do, it is not just Cavendish families that should be outraged. It is every family in Chester, Andover, and Baltimore who should be really upset by this idea. There are really simple things like Green Mountain has had issues where kids are dropped off on time, but they're still late classes, or they're present for some classes and absent for others, and nobody knows where those kids were. And we get reports about that. It's in the school newsletter that, hey, we need to do something about the fact that kids are on campus on time, but not actually in class on time.
No problem in every high school though.
Yes, it is not a problem for every 6th grader. So it's a bad thing. And it's a bad thing for 7th graders, and it's a bad thing for 9th graders. do we really want to add sixth graders to that? There's simple things like how much time do Chester and Cavendish sixth graders spend outside? Like that matters developmentally to be able to go outside. Seventh graders do not go outside from 7:40 or whenever they are dropped off until 2:45. And it's not good. What happens when a student regularly doesn't turn in work at Chester Andover or at Cavendish? I get a phone call, either when they're doing something great or when they're struggling. That doesn't happen at Green Mountain. So there is really good evidence that when a student switches schools at any age, academic performance goes down and behavioral problems go up. The academic performance usually catches up in 2 to 3 years. The behavioral problems keep going. So when we hear about problems with bullying, when we hear about problems with not showing up, when we hear the language of students in trouble at our school, all of that gets worse and adds another year to it. And whether it is the student being bullied or the student being the bully, if you start that a year earlier, it progresses to a much worse place. This board, over the last 2 years, has heard about physical violence at Green Mountain. We've heard about bullying that requires students to find other options for their education. Even though Green Mountain is already over the limit for sending students, we've heard about a culture where Green Mountain students don't take testing seriously. And we've heard about issues among staff at Green Mountain. So even if everything catches up, do we really want sixth graders to deal with all of that? Like, even if it is just one added year of that kind of stress to families, I'm not okay with it. We have heard that Chester Andover has space problems, of course, and the board voted to build on that elementary school. Then we heard that those space problems were not so pressing that a temporary building would be appropriate. We would rather just wait until it takes time to build brick and mortar and the expense to build brick and mortar. But now we're back. Space problems are so bad, we have to do something about it, even if it is at the cost of the well-being and the performance of these kids. That was part 2. I'm so sorry. I really didn't mean this. All right, part 3 is about why are we only hearing about this now? We heard about the idea of sending sixth graders to Green Mountain from our engineers talking about the hazards and getting the levels low enough so that they could go. Then the next time we heard about it was in a superintendent report where it was referred to as a middle school model. one of the things that the board is charged with is being that link between the public and the schools, and we have not been given that opportunity to get any information from the public about what they think about sixth grade going to middle school and how that would affect them. If we are under policy governance, I completely agree that that is completely the superintendent's choice, but there is still that piece of keeping the board informed and having that link to the public, which we haven't had at all in this. So I'm all for the experts making the decision, but I think pushing this through at the expense of students and their performance when our job is to take care of students and their performance is not okay. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry.
Scott, your hand was up.
I was gonna comment.
You
on
didn't
that.
have to,
I'm gonna
like,
keep my
turn your
comment to
sound off.
myself.
Hang on, Scott.
There you go. Scott, give it a try.
You hear me?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna make a comment, but I think I should just refrain.
Okay. All right. What else do I need to say? Wait.
I agree strongly with Lisa's point about the outdoors. If and when we need to make that decision to move sixth graders to this building, we need to give them the outlet that they need during their school. They are not old enough to be indoors in school for that time. And I strongly agree that that is very significant.
Can I ask Kate a question? Kate, yes. It's my understanding from my middle schooler that they do have opportunities to get outdoors during the.
Yes,
Explain.
when the weather is nice enough, and we're even looking at ways to do this when there's snow. We have middle schoolers go outside after lunch, they can play games, they can interact socially. We have students walk the track on Mondays and Fridays. We have wellness activities, at least 2 times a week where students can elect to do outdoors activities. Our PE teacher also does outdoor sports and activities with students when appropriate. We can't be outside for maybe the same period of time, consecutively that a 6th grader might have recess, but our students are outside during.
Is that a part of the middle school model that's being developed, Kate?
Absolutely.
So my middle schooler reports not having been outside 5 days in a row.
Your middle schooler was outside today and yesterday.
Okay.
So Wayne, if the 6th graders come here, do the elementary teachers follow them, or are they gonna be taught by middle school teachers here?
Most likely we'd have to work it out so that there's no loss of staff. But most likely some of the teachers would follow. And there are other options that are talked about, and I think it's important to touch on a couple of these is, there's 9 kids at Cavendish. If the 9 kids at Cavendish, if it were the board's will, they could stay at Cavendish.
Right.
Or it could just be here. The other piece about this is there have been open forums where this has been discussed going all the way back to my very first open forum. But we're not on a trajectory that this is a possibility because of the PCB issues, which is why it's kind of on the periphery. But most certainly, and I think I've shown that over the multiple open forums I have every month at every district, that this would be discussed, with the community to figure out the planning, talk about benefits and what wouldn't work and, bring it back to the board for a final decision. I, apologize that doesn't seem that that's been clear.
I just said, when I first joined the board and this was the discussion, I've supported the middle school model from the start. I still do. The only thing that stopped it since I've been here was the PCB levels, which, okay, fine, full stop. If that's remediated and it's possible, I still support that and would like to pursue it. That's my.
Wait. Can you share in what way that was a discussion? Because I did not know about it.
That was discussed at early, I couldn't tell you when without pulling up notes, but I remember having that discussion, I think, back when the restructuring committee was still a big deal. We're having a lot of local meetings about what are they gonna do? And that was a big part of the discussion, was moving the sixth grade to the high school, trying to establish that 6 through 8 middle school model in a kind of separate, not separate wing, but their own section of the building. And we got as far exploring that as the PCB results came back. They said, we can't put kids in that age group in here, it's too high. And that was, okay, moving on. And that led to, what else can we do? Let's put an addition on Chester. Maybe this could still be a possibility if the building is remediable.
And while I don't agree completely with the characterization, there are problems in high school like there are at many. One of the reasons for trying to create that program was to deal with those problems and to address them by creating a program that is actually going to develop the skills within the students so that hopefully we don't have this. It's one of the avenues, yeah.
Students in the school that are overcrowded, they're not benefiting either from that point, so.
So we have been told over and over again that they are fine, that it's not worth building temporary buildings for them to be in. The situation is good enough that it's better to wait for a permanent building.
Sure, yeah. I'm just saying, like, smaller classroom sizes such as Cavendish, they get more
Individual.
individual one-on-one time than an overcrowded classroom.
They have private spaces for their children who should be in private spaces to take care of the things that need to be taken care of, right?
Sure.
And in discussion, wasn't a lot of the reasons why we held back on Chester Andover and stuff is because we're and still on everything, we're still wondering what the state is gonna do, what schools are gonna be open. We don't know this. Everything's a mystery. Are we throwing money at buildings that are just gonna be for sale in 2 years or not?
I think the other thing that I think this entire board needs to remember is that it was nearly a year and a half. And we got nowhere. We look at nowhere tonight. You know, and what we did effectively do was pit two towns against each other. And I am not willing to rehash that in this meeting, pretty much at all. Again, the board can decide to do that. I think when we went through that entire dynamic, we came to a place where I don't want to say relinquished control, because I feel like control seems to be a sticking point. But we said, we are not the experts. We are not capable of making this decision, and we decided to give it to the experts. And let them make the decision, and I still stand by that. You know, and if we go into policy governance in the next couple of meetings, I'm still comfortable with saying the people that have the degrees and the experience and the jobs will be the ones to make those decisions. I cannot see this discussion going well, and I can't even fathom that we're gonna come to a place where we're making a vote to put the sixth graders anywhere tonight. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I am overwhelmed by the coldness and meanness of this board. And I'm just gonna leave now. You still have a quorum, and so go for it.
As you say, our teachers here suck and our kids are stupid. You're overwhelmed by the meanness of this board. Thank you.
Yep, exactly.
Just take a minute. All right. We want to move forward.
Brett, You had your hand up.
I just wanted, as the middle school coordinator, I did want to mention a couple things, but Kate mentioned most of them about how we have wellness. And so I also teach a middle school wilderness class that kids can take as an elective in middle school. We go outside, we build shelters, we learn permanent skills, we make fires. Today it was raining, so we did bow and drill in my classroom, safely. But we do flint and steel and stuff like that. We teach kids how to properly work with knives for doing flint and steel and stuff like that. So there are opportunities for kids. You know, part of that middle school model is trying to develop them to gain some maturity, and so we try to offer them some like early elective classes, like not obviously at the level of high school, but like, hey, if you can show some maturity, we can teach. We can, you know, I brought 9 kids out to the Saranac Lake region for 3 days a couple weeks ago to go canoeing with kids, all middle schoolers, and they had a great time. And you know, we slept in tents and all that kind of stuff. So there are certainly opportunities. I would actually, I mean, that's something that you can't do outside of the school. So I think we're aware of needing to get kids outside as much as possible. And I would also say when we have days, well, like, you know, state mandated testing with VCAC and stuff like that, we make sure that at the end of that, we build in time for some kind of break, whether it is going outside, walking the track, giving them free time to play Foursquare or go into the gym. I think we're incredibly mindful of the strain it has on kids and trying to balance that space with still sharing a high school too, which is an added challenge. But I think we actually do that really well. And it's only gotten better with that more of that middle school model that's, you know, with the help of Miss Leaf.
Thank you for sharing.
Great to hear.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate that.
Just need to lose wishes to the professionals.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no more discussion regarding the 6th grade, we'll move to an update about the paper of record.
So there was a question, and I wanted to make sure that I confirmed it about paper of record. There is no requirement on boards to have a voted paper of record. The requirement is that, you know, when warnings go out, that they do go to a news agency, and it could be a radio station, it could be a paper. It doesn't have to be the same one each time. And so I just wanted to, you know, update the board with that information.
Lane, could we do that ourselves?
What's that?
You put it on social media?
We should, there is a requirement that it goes to a local news source. It's just, it's our choice where we send it and when we send it. We don't even have to pay them to put it up. It's their prerogative whether they post it or not. Yeah, our job is to make sure we get it in their hands.
Okay, thank you.
Anything more on that? Okay. Support staff negotiations team.
So the Green Mountain support staff, they are up and ready to go for negotiations of a new contract. And so we want to make sure that we've got a secure team from this board as representatives to go and engage them in that process. And so I would ask the board to make a decision on those two members.
But you, huh?
So we already did.
Yeah, there's been some changes. Can you remind the board of what the anticipated expectation?
My guess is, and I'm looking at how things went with Ludlow Mount Holly. You're probably talking anywhere from 5 to 8 meetings. They're typically in the evening, from usually start at 6 o'clock. They're typically planning for about 2 hours. Chris Leopold, as a district legal representative, would be the spokesperson. The role of the board members is that are there as a subcommittee is to actually engage in negotiations, try to reach tentative agreements with the union team. And then those tentative agreements, once things are finally settled, would come back to the main board for a final vote, just like they would have to go back to the union membership body for a main vote.
When does this start?
It could start as soon as folks are ready. So
So 5 to 8 meetings.
What's the timeline?
Yeah, over the course of what?
I'm just trying to figure out.
Typically, what they try to do early on is it's probably every other week if folks can find, common time to do that. Because usually there's, as people are exchanging proposals, there's a need to go back and do research. Okay, how would this impact, programming for kids? How would this impact costs? To be able to do those analysis. But as you get a little bit further along down the process, and more is known, it moves a little bit quicker. You might be able to do it weekly until you can track out.
Where?
That would be by common agreement. My guess is if it's the Green Mountain support staff, it would likely probably be a little bit. It's also, they can be hybrid meetings as well.
I was gonna ask if there would be an option for Zoom.
Yeah. And it's better usually in person if you can, but it's obviously this day and age, it's not always possible.
Looking for 2 board members to join our legal counsel to negotiate.
Could be 2, could be 3, could be 4. It's the board's prerogative. Yeah. You are the legal entity that negotiates with them and then makes the agreements with them.
I don't really want to hold things up, and I mean, unless multiple people want to step up, I'm happy to be one person, but I don't know, stand in front of it to do this.
Trying to math out the time to do this because I would love to help out.
So if 2 of us did it, would we both have to be there each time?
I would shoot for 3,
Okay.
because that way at least 2 would have to be there each time. If 1 can't make it, then you still have 4. Because the quorum's based on the subcommittee size.
I have a small gap in between other commitments that might allow me to do this. It kicks off fairly quickly and.
Anyone else have interest?
Already.
Okay, let's start with 2.
But, I'll figure it out.
Myself and Casey.
Can you speak up, Adrian? I can barely hear you.
You and me.
So
Okay.
You should vote the subcommittee.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
So, can I have a motion that this board appoints Casey?
Yeah,
Leahy
I'll jump
and Jeff too. Yay, team.
I'll make the motion. Is that Jeff?
I'll second.
Yes, it was Jeff. So Casey, myself and Jeff. Okay, so made by Lois. Second? All right, all in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Lawn mowing.
So we kind of talked about this, but again, given governance piece right now, it would be a board decision on whether we pursue anything in regards to the lawn mowing and just trying.
I like the idea of consolidate, like if we have the equipment,
Yeah.
personnel, I kind of like the idea of using what we have. What is the board's will
I would
or
like,
thoughts?
I would like to see it consolidated
I
and use
would
what we
too.
have,
Consolidate.
but savings are savings, so.
Yeah, especially in this environment.
Exactly.
You'd like to define what that means by consolidate?
Like, is that the Green Mountains?
Bring their lawn
Would-
over to Chester and Andover and.
Assuming we have the equipment.
I was told we did. That's what the conversation was, is that because they were bringing it down to mow the softball fields across the way.
Yep.
There should be a motion.
No, but like, is there some thoughts on?
I'll say, for Todd, like confirm, we have.
Yeah, it
trailer.
would be good.
Make sure to have staff to do it too.
I know Todd's been the one that's been mowing the softball.
Cross that. Where are we? Another conversation. I'm confused. Okay, so
Talk about Green Mountain softball. club.
Yes.
Landscaping stuff.
who does that?
Shane Fuller Properties.
So not us.
Todd said he was the one that was mowing our softball.
We'd mow it when we had a team down there. We don't have a team right now. So we're
Alright.
not mowing.
Sense.
So if Todd is taking the equipment somewhere and mowing, he'll have the equipment. All right. Is there-
I move we keep it in-house.
I would second.
All right, so Jerry's making a motion to have the mowing of the Chester Andover School combined with the mowing for Green Mountain, is that?
Yep.
Okay, so, and who seconded it? Katie. All right, is there further discussion on that?
My only question is, have we discussed with what is it gonna be not doing it?
It would be the team here.
The maintenance team, just to understand the logistics of this completely before we say, yay, has this been discussed with them as you have the capacity to do this on top of your current duties?
It's my recollection that we discussed this before, and there was, and I think Todd was here, that I don't recall any objection.
Motion could be.
Actually, I don't think he was here. I think that was when he had to leave because of personal stuff.
Try to charge me with.
Don't have something to
Sure, the gentleman that does the mowing of other services at Chester Andover, does the spring cleanup and the, fall cleanup and Bolt is the, ground side.
Right,
He does other.
Is it a problem?
I just want to make you aware
They're
that.
saying if we cut the mowing contract, potentially cutting other services and contracts in place.
Would it be wise to table this motion until next?
I have more
Yeah.
concerns about. I don't mind, let's mow with their own equipment, but I need to understand the
The
full logistics of it.
Yeah, and this is what it's gonna be when we're making a.
Right.
So, I need a motion that to table.
I'll move to table it. Second.
Okay, so.
But the goal is to have time to have a conversation.
So if Lisa and Lois pending discussion, let's talk at the next. Okay. So we're gonna the first reading of EL 2.4 and EL 2.5 at this meeting. Mandated policy updates for VSBA first read, sections C and D. Students and instruction. I don't think I have that.
They're in the,
Did I miss that?
they're in a folder in the folder.
I'm not gonna be able to.
It's
I did
a
not
first
see
read.
that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Did
Yeah,
anybody
these
else
are-
read it?
Yeah, these are again a group of
Yes, I think
mandates.
they're all now.
Yeah.
So,
Fair.
I mean, I read them all.
I read so much, I probably did, but I do not remember them. I'm sorry. Okay, so it's a first read. So make sure, Adrian, make sure you've read it. And then recommended policy first read, district equity policy, again, first read.
And this is a recommended, this was brought up at the Level Mount Holly, board. It is, a policy that kind of goes along with the equity standards that is now law that the districts are supposed to be pursuing. And it's not a bad thing necessarily to have on a policy portfolio.
Right.
That's the piece that's on there. Yep.
Read, so. And then, BOCES,
So these two are actually kind of semi-irrelevant. So the BOCES is, it's creation of districts that get together, kind of share resources, usually around special education. It's a model that the state, had passed in law that it was hoping that people were going to pursue. The TRSU board, this affects the TRSU board, did vote to become a member of the regional BOCES. And so what will eventually happen is that they will be some small fees up front to get things up and going, but it'll provide us access to specialized services that we can't get on our own. And be able to share those folks and the staff along with the other districts. Interestingly enough, when the redistricting group had a discussion the other night, this actually is becoming one of their probably recommended consolidation models, that the groups that have come together to form a BOCES, to form a collaborative, they are likely going to force them to merge together to become the districts, if that's the one that's accepted. So that's kind of interesting. But the goal is it should save significant money and hopefully give us access to kind of what we were talking about earlier. We've got students with mental health issues that we got great staff, but they don't have the skill set. It's just not their training. This will give us access to people that have the training that might have a positive. And then the voting proxies, just because this meeting was moved,
We did this with the TRSU, does it?
Yeah.
So it has to be done in agreement as well.
no, because that meeting is over at this point in time. Just because we moved the date.
It got moved. Okay, I was like.
Yeah, we've been trying to get these agendas in early, so this agenda's on the hold.
Got it, okay,
Yeah.
so these are irrelevant topics right now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our second public comment.
Right. I know the board can't or doesn't need to respond or whatever, but I was on Zoom, so it was kind of hard to hear. So if clarity can be added, but I thought I heard that Lane mentioned that non-bargaining staff salaries need major adjustments, that they're too low, and that the board should be prepared to see large increases. Was that a fair statement that I heard?
I said that they needed to be analyzed because they appear to be too low, relative to.
And is that
Significantly more if the question is about relative to the teachers, significantly more than the teachers. So I can give you an example, Ludlow Mount Holly support staff got about a 40% increase over 3 years at the end of the negotiations. And that just brings them up to being comparable with surrounding districts.
okay? You were saying non-bargaining though in those comments earlier, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so non-bargaining would include admin and office staff who recently received a 4% raise for office staff. Is that correct?
Non-bargaining, what we do is we try to predict where negotiations are gonna land, especially if negotiations don't wrap up before the budget season, which they have not. And so they get what we predict the teachers are probably.
Okay, and would you advocate that?
Is this a conversation you guys can have?
Well, you're right, this shouldn't be happening, this is open.
That's what I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off, just is this something you guys can have? outside
Yeah, we can have the
board?
conversation, but this is, she's right, public comment is just for public to comment.
You didn't have to respond.
No,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
understand that there was a
Yeah.
Zoom issue, I just.
Well, I do hope that non-bargaining staff salaries are looked at after bargaining staff's salaries are, reach an agreement. Because that is still ongoing and teachers are working without a contract. And I did hear support staff contracts. That conversation kind of came up, and I just want to advocate for our support staff. We're continuing to see more and more jump ship, some really high quality support staff. I had one who left for about a week last week and wasn't sure if they were going to return and is looking elsewhere. And as soon as that person came back in my room a couple days ago, it was a breath of fresh air for me and for my students. I can't imagine trying to have a living wage on what the support staff make and what they do for students. It's, the class sizes right now at Green Mountain, at least in our 7 and 8 are relatively large for the space the room size that we have. And having that additional person in there that is competent is something that is, you can't replace it really. And we all know what it looks like between having someone that is with it and is there and wants to be there versus someone that is just there for the healthcare. And at times that pay can only be like, all right, well, after deductions, it's just for the healthcare. And that's not fair for those people because they work incredibly hard. And for them to go, well, I could make more at minimum wage or to go to McDonald's is really upsetting. And so I just think that we have to make sure that we think about it more than just it's not just another body in the room. It's someone that is working very closely with these kids. It's someone that is doing all the trainings. It's someone that is, trauma informed. It's someone that might be the person that overhears a conversation about self-harm or something like that could step in and save a kid's life. So I just want you to keep a lot of these things in mind when you're having conversations about support staff too. I know it would be hard to bring up to where it needs to be financially, but we need to make gains in that area over the next several years to keep qualified and competent people around. Thank you.
Any hands up? All right, that brings us to board comments.
Wait, sorry, is it, may I ask a question at this point about what was just being discussed? Of just bargaining?
It's public comment. You can make a comment, but it's not a back and forth. So if you
Oh,
got.
okay. Like a
Yeah.
rhetorical question, I guess then. Yeah, my name is Chris Marks. I'm a resident of Proctorsville. Hello, thank you. Yeah, my question as you guys were discussing bargaining staff or bargaining employee pay increases versus teacher pay increases, would it be public knowledge? Like, could I see records or a chart of bargaining staff pay increases over the last 10 years side by side with non-bargaining staff pay increases over 10 years? Is that something that would be available to the public to see?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it should be all public knowledge, especially at the conclusion, right? It's information that is at the conclusion of the bargaining process, so that should all be public. If you want to connect with me, shoot me an email or give a call. Let me know what you're looking for. I'm happy to do a little bit of research.
Oh, thank you. That would be very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Wendy, yeah.
Wendy?
I just want to have made a comment about the conversation around sixth grade potentially moving up. And that is just that both academically and emotionally, I don't think it's a good move for sixth graders to join a junior high. And then the second piece to that is just this idea that we've got potentially massive changes coming soon with Act 73. And so I think it's all the more reason to hold off on making any major changes within our own structure, because we may be required to do something that will totally negate what gets set up for us in the next few years. So I would like to voice caution to the board in that decision.
Thanks. Thank you. Is there any other comments? We'll listen to board comment. Anyone? All right, so our first executive session will be sorry.
I move that the board enter executive session and include the superintendent to discuss proposed changes to an employee's contract as permitted under 1 BSA 3133, which allows executive session for the appointment, employment, or evaluation of a public officer or employee.
Is there a second? This does not have to be a two-part. So who's the second? Is there any? Huh? Are we inviting Lee?
I think.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know your thought. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, we are in executive session at 8:38. Okay, so we are out of executive session at 8:42. The board is taking no action. And we will be having the second executive session that was added to the agenda. All right, unless there's anything else, our next regular meeting will be November 20th at 6 p.m. here.
We're not having executive.
No. Unless do you want to do the?
Oh, I can do.
Oh, okay, then I, sorry, I spoke too soon. I'm so used to being heard.
So it does the board. Yeah.
I'm fine with it. Okay, so the exact same, so.
This one's a two-parter. So the first motion is that I move that the board find that premature public knowledge of.
Is somebody write that?
If you want me to say it, and then you guys can just, I can try it. So I ask that the board move to find that premature public knowledge of negotiations that are happening in the teachers would place the board at a significant disadvantage in those negotiations.
I will make that motion. See, Lois, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, second.
Under VSA 13.1, I would recommend that the board move to enter executive session to discuss negotiations, labor negotiations that are ongoing for the staff.
Cheryl.
And invite them to Cheryl. Yeah.
So moved. Katie and
Second.
who's that, Jerry? All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right, so we are now November 20th, 6 PM here, and
Motion to adjourn.
Scott and Casey, all in favor? Opposed, all right, we're adjourned at 5.
Everyone gets one out.